Okay, KLR 250. The more you know, maintenance matters. I have watched videos and read online about how to do the valve adjustment on the KLR 250, and I know the 650s are a little persnickety as well. And there was some debate as to whether the index marks on the cam shafts should be facing each other or facing away. So here's the official word on that. When you turn a crankshaft counterclockwise from the left side with a ratchet, when the valves have just finished opening and closing, moving downwards, they actually call them the inlet valves. While watching the movement of the inlet valves, which is the intake valves, the valves to the rear of the engine. When the valves have just finished opening and closing, moving downwards and returning upwards, turn the crankshaft in the same direction about another third of a turn until the T mark on the magneto flywheel is aligned with the slit in the inspection cover. So what they don't tell you here is there are two marks on that flywheel, and they're very hard to see. One looks like it says U, which is probably the before top dead center for indexing the ignition, and the other one is a T. Yeah, well, here you go. What they also don't tell you is that the freaking T is sideways. That's their T. It's sideways on the freaking thing. So I'm looking at these two things and going, man, which one is it? So that's something you need to know. The T is sideways. And I'll show you what this looks like on the bike in a minute. They also say that to check the valves that you have to measure. What I did the first time I did it was I measured between the lobe on the camshaft and the rocker. It's not really a rocker, it's an overhead cam. So the cam only has one lobe, and I'm going to call it the rocker, pushes down on both valves, on two valves. But they do say that you have to check the clearance by putting a gauge between the where is it? Measure the clearance of each valve by putting the feeler gauge, thickness gauge they call it, between the adjusting screw and the stem of the valve. So this is why this is persnickety, because if there's any play on that rocker at all, there's going to be some side to side. So you almost need two feeler gauges, and you have to put them both in between the two valves that you're measuring and the stems, because if there's any play there, they'll be off. So this is why it is tricky to do these KLRs. So on the bike, what I did on my first valve adjustment is I looked at the lobe on the camshaft. Usually if there's any uneven wear on those, you know that one side's off over the other. And I don't see any unusual wear on those lobes. That's the exhaust, and that's the intake. You'll see some uneven wear. That's one valve, that's the other valve. This is your automatic compression release, by the way. Everybody should, who has one of these bikes, should big shout out to these things. This is why we can kick these things so easy at 11:1 compression ratio. That's what cracks the exhaust valve open to release the compression valve. So now let's take a look at what these index marks look like. There it is. That's the T. And it is sideways. And there is a mark just to the left, counterclockwise of this, probably for ignition, and it's pretty easy to get full. I don't know if that's going to make a difference, to be honest with you. So this is what the camshafts look like. The camshaft index marks look like. Mine are painted so they can be seen. They are facing away from each other. And this is the proper engine position to go ahead and measure the valve clearances. You want to do an inspection on here on the tension of your chain. Make sure it is not sloppy. This one is not, because then means you're going to have problems. You're going to have to service or work on your tensioner, chain tensioner. This one's in good shape. I'm not going to mess with it. And you also want to inspect the valve cover itself. If you're having timing chain tensioner issues, the chain will start eating into the valve cover, and you'll see chafing here, and you could also see chafing, meaning wear marks, which is a lot harder to see down in there. As you can see, this has a nice original OEM finish on it. If this chain starts wailing around. Alright, so that is where we're at. We're going to go ahead and do this check. This is basically a 1,000 mile check since the last time I did it. Actually slightly less. I was at 11.5 when I checked it. I'm at 12.1 right now. So, but I am pushing it because the schedule on this is actually just about 500 miles. But if I'm confident that these valves are in good shape, then I feel confident I can push these checks out a little further. Just do the oil change maybe. So that's where we're at. I am also going to be torquing my head bolts down. I'm just going to check them anyway. If they're in spec, then I know that it's not an issue either. I think this was a bigger problem on the earlier bikes, the 85 to 89, where they used much more aggressive, the 28 horsepower ones, where they used much more aggressive cams. Those things just ate top ends in pretty short order. But they made 28 horsepower. I have a 250cc four-stroke, so that was the trade-off. Alright, so there you go. That's the word from the manual. And good luck, and be safe. Have fun. Keep the rubber side down unless you're doing backflips or front flips on purpose. Okay, so this is the exhaust valve check on the KLR 250. Again, these KLRs 650s and 250s are a little tough to adjust because they use a single lobe cam that actuates a rocker that hits both valves, and the manual says they want to check the distance between the adjustment screw and the valve stem. So really, if there's any play side to side in that rocker, you need two feeler gauges, two sets of feeler gauges. And here I have one set of feeler gauges at 0.20 millimeters, which is about 0.08 thousandths. So one of these feeler gauges is metric, and the other one's actually English. And that's one, the English one's actually a brass one. So put them both in there, and they should slide in there. Not a lot of resistance, but some drag. So I put my my longer one in, the one that's further away to reach. If you have angled feeler gauges are best for this because of this steep angle. This is the best way to get in at these intake valves anyway. Exhaust, my bad. Alright, and then use my brass gauge to slip back and forth. I don't know that I can show you that nice light drag because I only have two hands. But it should be a nice light drag. Nice light drag there. And this is my brass one. Some nice light drag. but definitely not loose, and obviously no wobble on that with those feeler gauges in there. So that's why these are a little difficult, but this is completely in spec, just like it was when I checked it a couple hundred miles ago, so I'm pretty happy with that. Using full synthetic oil in here, which really wasn't a thing when these things came out. These are very high performance 4-stroke high compression engines, and they really needed that oil, but that really didn't come out till 10-15 years later, when Yamaha released their high performance 4-strokes, and you had to use the Yamalube oil, which was quite expensive. So there you go. Keep them tight. Well, keep them in spec anyway.